Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of the Real World Podcast. We are still in the Tape Crusaders. There's just so much Batman, everybody. This is a film podcast brought to you by Mike Thomas and Matt Waters. Even though I'm speaking first, am the second part of that equation. My name is Matt Waters. I forever regret putting my name second in these sort of listings, but I'm joined by Mike Thomas as always. Mike, how are you doing?
I'm doing very well. I am the first name. Therefore, I am most important, and I expect to be treated that way.
I mean, I won't deny that. This is your website. I just literally was like, oh, hey, can I maybe, join in and we'll use the real world name? What a punk I am.
Yeah. And try to convince the world that Suicide Squad's good. So that was obviously a poor decision on my part.
Why must you hyperbolize? I didn't say that. I didn't say the word Suicide Squad is good. I said, here are some things I like about it.
You basically said it was good.
Mike, I look for the good in everything, and you are just dead inside and want to dismiss things outright.
100%.
100%.
I can't deny that.
And that's why our partnership works.
Yes.
And you crush all the dreams I build.
Speaking of, The Dark Knight Returns.
So The Dark Knight Returns. Ever heard of it, anyone? It's the most iconic Batman story there is, really. It's the one that is quoted ad nauseum when talking about influence on film projects and whatnot. And just to save you potentially an hour of time, I love this, and Mike hates it. Okay, goodbye, everyone.
Now, this film is also, it's so big, it's also really heavily influenced the last two major Batman theatrical releases, too, which is significant in and of itself. So, I mean, basically, Warner Brothers just spent close to $1 billion making The Dark Knight Returns in the last two movies that they released for Batman.
This is true. Quite obviously, Batman vs. Superman takes enormous parts of this. You can see small aspects of it in other films, such as The Dark Knight Rises, just the whole general coming out of retirement thing, and even the line about, you're going to see a show tonight, kid, or whatever it is.
Yeah. And I think you could even argue there's The Dark Knight Rises is closer to the spirit of this book than Batman vs. Superman, which is much more openly aping some of the things from this movie, or this story.
I mean, this the key sort of thing people talk about with The Dark Knight Returns is it is the most iconic battle between Batman and Superman. So obviously, when you have a whole movie based around that conflict, you're going to invoke some stuff from this. But there's a lot more to this story than just that.
Now, I haven't read the book in a couple of years, but it was striking to me, rewatching the movie, that the Batman vs. Superman element feels far smaller in retrospect than it did when I first read or first watched this story.
Yeah, it's an odd one, wherein it almost feels tacked on at the end.
Yeah.
They layer it in, you go back and forth to it in the book a bit more. I think for the sake of a narrative, it works better in the film, but yeah, it does feel very sort of, and now here's some Superman stuff. But for better or worse, this is a large, very ambitious story that Frank Miller told way back in 1986, 3 years before I was born. And I was told to point out that Frank Miller actually started writing Daredevil ever so slightly before Batman, because I said last time he basically turned Daredevil into Batman. I apologize, Frank Miller. I apologize.
Fake geek boy, you.
Well, I mean, we've got to address these things. If I'm going to make these bold claims, I have to be able to back them up occasionally.
Hey, if someone's listening and making corrections, that's probably a compliment, so.
Yeah. SoundCloud.com/Mike and Matt, YouTube, The Real World Podcast. There are many people criticizing our podcast, and I fight back, yeah.
Oh, I haven't read the YouTube comments in forever.
Oh, they're good. They're good times. We have reductive thinking, Mike. I refuse to listen to any more of this because of the reductive thinking. This is petty. The Dark Knight Returns. So this is the 15th DC Animated Universe film, released in two parts. Came out September 2012 and January 2013. You can get both together on one enormous thing. That came out later in 2013.
Both available on HBO Go right now, much to my convenience. So,
oh, well, there you go. I can't tell. It lists the budget for each of these as $3.5 million. I don't know if that's combined or each, but combined they made $10 million at the box office, and I would imagine they actually sold more on DVD than they did at movie tickets. So a quiet little profit.
Yeah, I would imagine so. I mean, I think those had to be like select screenings. Like this wasn't like Phantasm got close to a fairly wide release, if I recall correctly. But this was, this was a blip on the radar.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. These are figures I've pulled quickly off Wikipedia and IMDb. They could be inaccurate, but from what I can tell, at most it cost like $7 million to make, and it made at least $10 million. So profit is profit. Directed by Jay Olivier, he does a lot of the DC animated stuff. He's also a storyboard artist for Deadpool, so the movie, that is. And Wonder Woman and a whole bunch of stuff. Written by Bob Goodman, who wrote the old Superman cartoon and a bunch of episodes of Elementary and Warehouse 13. So, go figure. Each one is 76 minutes long. They are, I think, pretty easy to get through, as I watched both back-to-back while simultaneously reading the comic. Minutes before this podcast recording started, I finished. So, I'm an expert right now.
Yeah, Matt has a long-term memory condition, so everything has to be done literally right up to the point of recording.
Well, I'm not one of these people that can just fire off a random scene that wasn't all that important but is poignant. I don't know.
All right, so Dark Knight Returns.
Dark Knight Returns.
This is a story that happened. Did you do your plot summary yet? Did I black out?
Wow, thanks. I didn't.
Okay. Well, that's why I usually remember when they happen. So I'm wondering, like, did I just black out and not hear it?
Well, I can make it very simple. It's an alternate future where Reagan is. I mean, remembering this was written in the 80s, Reagan is still president, but it's the near alternate future or whatever. Bruce Wayne's 55 and retired as Batman for 10 years. But because of a gang of criminals that Mike adores, called the Mutants, who have run rampant throughout Gotham, he comes out of retirement. He battles and allegedly...
Slice and dice!
Slice and dice! He fights Two-Face, who was supposedly rehabilitated. There's a new Robin called Carrie Kelly. Yes, that is a lady's name. Takes out the leader of the Mutants, and all of this makes the Joker, who's been catatonic for 10 years, snap out of it and smile. And he's invited on a talk show, obviously murders everybody there. Batman chases after him, almost kills him. The public believe he did kill him. He sort of kills himself. And then after that, a Soviet missile knocks out power across large parts of the country, which is a difficult area of the film and the book, but we'll get to that in a minute. Martial law is declared, and somehow Gotham ends up being one of the safest cities in America because Batman rallies the former mutants behind him.
On a horse.
On a horse. God damn it, yes. No cars work anymore. So he's on a horse. And they're called the Sons of Batman now. Reagan is embarrassed by all of this, so he sends his agent Superman. That's right, Superman works for the Prez, for the Gipper. And he sends him to essentially kill Batman. He says, do what you have to, but it's pretty clear he means kill Batman. They have a big old fight. Batman almost wins and says, essentially, I could have killed you. I want you to remember this. But then he apparently succumbs to a heart attack. Alfred destroys Wayne Manor on Bruce's orders and then dies himself, which is pretty sad. Mike will have some things to say about that, I think. And then at Bruce Wayne's funeral, Superman is one of the last people to leave, and he hears Bruce Wayne's pulse underground and sort of smiles at Robin and then leaves. And sometime later, we see Bruce and the Sons of Batman setting up a new headquarters somewhere underground. Implication being Bruce is now training an entire force of Batmen.
There's a lot going on.
There is a lot going on.
And no, this is not one of the thicker Batman books that I've read. I mean, like Long Halloween is like 300 or 400 pages, right? But this doesn't really feel as thick. But they jam a ton in there.
Yeah, 4 books and a lot happens.
Yeah, I mean, you just heard the names of some of the most iconic characters, and they're all stuffed into this fairly compact story that exists in an alternate timeline. I mean, like an unofficial alternate time. You know, this is essentially a one-shot. I mean, before the sequels came out, it was a one-shot. They weren't like saying this was the future. It's very weird. There's a lot.
There is a lot.
There's a lot.
We could take it sort of act by act. Like there's 4 books, and they sort of roughly correlate to half an hour each of the film, which is adapted in spots like shot for shot exactly. Like while reading it and watching it, I could almost essentially read it from the page as it was being spoken, and then sometimes they shuffle some stuff around, which I think is generally for the best.
I think if I were to my major issue with that, I think this is probably more of a miniseries than even a 2-part movie. So I mean, I guess the whole story is about 2.5 hours long. I feel like there's like 4 hours of story here, maybe. And a lot of it feels very rushed and tacked on. I mean, everything with Superman feels just like... I mean, I remember when I was watching this for the first time, because I think I watched it first before I read it. I was like, what the fuck? Superman?
Yeah.
Like, we're just going to introduce Superman halfway through? And, like, this is going to end in a Batman versus Superman confrontation? What? That didn't really feel... I mean, I'm used to it now because I've read the book. I've seen the movies multiple times. Like, I know the deal, so I guess, like, I'm ready for it. But when you're not ready for it, it's really jarring.
It is, but it's kind of written that way too, I think. I mean, he is introduced slightly earlier, and they do, as I said, they move back and forth a bit more. For better or worse, they also, in the book, Superman is presented more sympathetically. In the film, he's almost just an out-and-out villain. It's much easier to get behind Batman, and I guess, you know, it's a Batman project, and Batman is, these days, far more popular than Superman, so...
Yeah.
Depending on your feelings on the Superman character, that's good or bad that they made that change.
Yeah. So I guess I think the best thing to do here is kind of just to break the story down into the 4 main things that Batman is going through, which is Harvey, the Joker, the mutants, and Superman, right? Those would be the big 4.
Yeah.
And I guess I'll preface this by saying there are a lot of cool things about this story. There's a lot of stuff on the margins that I think is really neat. There's actually kind of a Watchmen quality to this story that I found. I don't know if that's crazy or not, but there's something... The tone of it felt very Watchmen-esque to me. I think the plots are probably pretty close to being relatively similar, all things considered. But I think almost none of the stories work for me on an individual level. Yeah, I think that's like my biggest issue with the movie. Is like, I don't know whether it's they didn't invest enough time or what was going on, but I don't know. Let's do them one by one. Okay. I'd say the most important one, to a large degree, is the mutant one, right?
I guess.
Regardless of that,
I mean, the order they occur in is Two-Face, mutants, Joker, Superman.
Yeah, but
I guess the mutants are what bring him out of retirement in the first place.
Yeah, so. the mutant and Harvey kind of are somewhat happening simultaneously. Yeah. So the mutant storyline.
Sure. Why don't you like the mutants? Is it just the general, like, you don't like Slice and Dice, the look, just the general design?
I don't like the look. I don't like the design.
That's fair.
Are they? I mean, like, they're just a gang, right? Like, that's the idea.
Oh yeah, they're not actually mutants. They just call themselves.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah. I mean, that'd be a real issue. But like, they take the time to like literally sharpen their teeth so they're all pointed.
Well, the leader
like
does.
Mutants.
I don't know if anyone else does.
Okay. It just looks dumb. It looks goofy. It doesn't look like Batman to me. But I think probably my idea of Batman is probably a bit more narrow-minded than some. So maybe that's more of an issue with me.
I mean, there are many kinds of Batman, and like that's fair enough. You don't like him, you don't like him.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of reminds me of I don't know. It's one of the newish ones with the new Batman and Robin, and there's like Doctor who's like turning all these villains into like animal masks or some bullshit. It just looks stupid. I don't know. I don't get it. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Do you mean the cartoon The Batman or?
No. It's a comic series. I forget what it's called. Anyway, I can't really get behind that look too much. It's too goofy for me in Batman. Anyway, I think one of the coolest things about this is the second fight and how Batman very clearly learns his lessons from getting destroyed by Bane. I mean, the lead mutant, and then he actually comes up with new strategies to defeat the big mutant the second time around.
You mean what he didn't do in Dark Knight? Rises. Okay.
Like, I know that was something pointed out at the time, and so I was looking for it, I guess, but it stood out to me. It stands out to me every time. I think that's clever. I think that's important.
Like, they fight. He gets his ass kicked. They fight again, and he's he makes
he's
them fight in
about
mud, so he can't move as fast. He breaks his various limbs.
Yeah, all that's good stuff. That's all good stuff. The mutant storyline also leads to the introduction of this new Robin, Carrie Kelly. Is her name right?
Yep.
I think there's something charming about it.
Yeah.
It feels very quick and sudden, though.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be. It's supposed to be quick and sudden. It's just like
there's not an enormous amount to her for how she's quite beloved. The design, I think, is what does it. Like she's quite spunky, and people find it charming, but there isn't actually
there's like that
Arya
Arya Stark quality to her. You know, like I think that kind of archetype for a young female. You know, like I think it's a popular archetype, and I think it's popular for mostly good reasons. I just like that there wasn't enough here. It was like we don't really like. I guess it's just this idea that she has the spirit. It's like it's more her spirit than anything she actually can do, which is fine, but feels a little tonally weird in this super, super grim, violent story.
I think it's more that what it says about the Robin character generally. The way Batman inspires others, like he first inspires Robin and then he inspires the city, and also this idea that he can't do it without her. Like realistically, she's not doing that much. But the very idea she's there kind of uplifts him a little bit. Like as soon as he has her, he attacks it all with more vigor than he did before.
Yeah, and she saves him obviously, and she's involved pretty much from beginning to end. She's probably the second main character of the story, considering how many characters come in and out. It's not bad. It's better than when I first saw it.
I think it's just an issue of trying to get it done in 4 issues and 2 films.
While 100 other things are happening.
Yeah, that's the thing. There's so much going on in this. I like almost all of it. It's just the fact that there is so much of it going on means that some of it isn't fleshed out as much as you'd maybe like it to be.
Yeah, and it's actually kind of funny in that this whole mutant thing. I feel like it was more just like a tool to like an excuse to bring Batman back. Like they're by far the least interesting element or obstacle that he faces in the story. They're completely two-dimensional. I do think they speak to what this idea, this abandoned class of people. I think that's always probably a good thing to. I think that's kind of right for Batman stories to go into. But
yeah, and I like that both versions of this do address that a little bit. You have the Doctor, whose name always escapes me, something with a W.
Bartholomew.
No, it's like something with a. Anyway.
Oh, it's Dr. Bartholomew.
No,
the psychiatrist?
There's another one. There's 2 doctors. One begins with a W.
Okay.
Anyway, he criticizes Batman repeatedly and says how he attracts certain elements of society and how he picks on those that I think he calls them like socially maligned or something. Oh, socially misaligned, something like that. And I like that general idea and how the story does deal with sort of mob mentality and downtroddenness.
Yeah. And I think that's actually a really great point. I think it also kind of speaks to one of the interpretations that I assume is out there. I'm not claiming this is original thought in any way, but like a lot of the story is kind of like a commentary on Batman fandom in general.
Yeah.
And that how stupid it is, like, or not stupid, but perhaps how thoughtless it is,
yes.
And like the way the mutants just rally behind Batman in the second half of the film. The fact that Batman, I mean, they have the peanut gallery, they have whatever. What's that fucking
the rogues gallery?
No, like the chorus, the Greek fucking chorus. That's what the fucking is. Like constantly talking about how he's a fascist, blah, 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 blah. Like that's like a constant thing chattering on in the background. I think it's in a lot of ways it's a commentary on Batman because Batman's kind of an asshole, and he's an asshole throughout most of the story. Like he's just like taking out cops all the time. Like the way he's like telling cops these men are my problem or whatever. Like that's one of the first I don't know, like be a little bit more discreet about it, be a little bit less of a dick about it all the time.
But I think that's the point. He sat back for 10 years and let them try, and he just can't take it anymore.
And I think that's fine. I'm not criticizing the storytelling. I think it's actually an interesting story. I'm saying it's painting Batman negatively, and I think fairly. I think in that sense it's good. I don't think there's probably enough. I think we need to see someone else's perspective, though, that wasn't painted super negatively. Like, the things like the cops or the new police commissioner saying, some of the newscasters saying, are not unreasonable, but they're given no credibility in the story. So it's like, okay, we're going to make Batman as awful as possible, but we're going to give you no alternative to root for or to sympathize with. And then maybe that was the point, though. Maybe that was the point.
I do.
Like, does anything like that sound weird, like, or wrong to you in any way?
No, no, I get what you're saying. I think, I mean, the general idea of him being, this fascist asshole, whatever. I think one of the strongest parts of this story is, I mean, you see it in the first few minutes that he's nothing. He's stopped being Batman, and he's nothing without it, and it's all consuming. And he's racing cars, and someone's saying, "Oh, have you got a death wish?" And it's like, yes, this man is clearly not actively trying to kill himself, but he's drinking and he's being dangerous. And
yeah, I love that comment from Gordon. It wasn't too long ago where you were drinking grape juice pretending it was champagne or something.
Yeah,
you switched to the real thing.
Yeah, and I think that's a great aspect of the character, that like it's so destructive and self-destructive, and it's all he has, and that's why I think Robin is an important character, because he's trying to make a better Batman who isn't destroying themselves. And it's something, Chris Sims is a sort of notable comics enthusiast on the internet. He made this point, and I'm going to paraphrase it. A big difference between someone like Batman and someone like Spider-Man is, in a world where you take away those identities from them, say they break their leg in a way that is somehow, say they're like paralyzed from the waist down or something, Batman would drink himself to death. Spider-Man, or Peter Parker, would do something with his scientific mind to help the world. And we see this in Dark Knight Rises, you see this in multiple things where Alfred is sort of getting at him to try and do something like that, where he's aged, you can help the city as Bruce Wayne, but he just will never accept that, and he just will always be consumed by being Batman. And I think that's a really great part. I wish it were actually given a bit more time. I wish he deliberated a bit more about jumping back in, because I mean, this story, it starts with, he hasn't been Batman for 10 years. And then you get 15, maybe 20 minutes. Not even that.
I think it's like 10 minutes.
Yeah, 10 minutes.
I just rewatched part 1 today.
Yeah.
It's about like 10 minutes.
The mutants, they try and get across they're bad, but I wish they did more. I wish they took it really far and showed like the police getting overwhelmed, or perhaps slipping back into corruption or something. Something that's like really selling, right, I have to come back.
But then again, I think...
But it does feed that narrative that he's just looking for an excuse. Yeah,
and I actually, in some ways, I almost wish... Like, I wish it wasn't mutants. I wish it was something a little bit more sudden that happened. That, because the city's been calm for a while, it kind of takes everyone off guard. Sure. And he convinces himself that he needs to come back when he probably doesn't really need to. I think, I'm nitpicking this 30-year-old comic book, but it's honestly just so, from the way you said it, like I'm getting more on board with the story, but like there's so many like small changes that would make me really enthusiastic for it.
Yeah, Frank Miller essentially he's victim to telling it too good of a story, in that you want more of it almost. Like in a way, he just came up with this. And he's just like, I wrote this, and he put it out, and now it's like, but if this were more and this were there, I just think stuff like that's quite interesting.
It's all interesting. I want it to be a little bit better, and I want a little bit more. All right, so that's the big story of part 1.
Well, I like what they do with Two-Face.
Yes,
how he's healed, and they perform plastic surgery on him to make him look normal again, and he is convinced. They say now both sides match, and he repeats that back at the end, but he is so broken psychologically, he sees himself as fully the monstrous side. And I actually think this is one of the parts where the book is a little bit better, because Batman is convinced it's not Harvey who's doing these crimes across the city and posing as Two-Face.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah, and they make it very obvious it is Harvey in the film. So, that, there's loads of very minor things. I've got a whole list of changes, good and bad, here. But I do
think
prefer
that's important, because Bruce's attachment to Harvey Dent, or the idea of Harvey Dent, if you prefer, is kind of a crucial part of the universe.
True. Because, we see him endorsing Harvey days before his release.
Yeah, almost every interpretation of Batman and Two-Face involves Bruce Wayne openly trying to help Harvey Dent in some way long after he's become Two-Face. I think even in Batman Forever, they make mention of that.
Yeah, in year one, they form that partnership.
Yeah,
which is part of Long Halloween. You know, him, Gordon, and Harvey Dent, which is in The Dark Knight.
So like, it's a constant throughout adaptation. So I think actually but it's pretty much not at all in the film. That whole idea that he can't believe that's actually Harvey. I don't think that's in the film at all.
It's not. He knows it is.
Yeah, that's kind of sad. I forgot about that.
It's because you get these thought bubbles in the comic. In a monologue, and taking that away in some spots is good and some is bad. So you obviously don't want him out loud being like, you know, I don't think that's Harvey or whatever, but it works when that's not the literal dialogue that I'm saying. But it does work better in that medium where you can go through what he's thinking.
Yeah. But so I think, I don't know, this story felt very short and rushed compared to the other ones. Yeah,
it is very short. Like,
he's
presented quite early on. Like, you see the race car and then you see Harvey, and then by 30 minutes into the film, he's dealt with. And it's like, eh. But that moment of him thinking he looks fully like the monster is one of the huge moments that sticks out from this story to me and makes me want to show this to people. Like, oh man, look at this idea that he sees himself as fully Two-Face when he's fully human.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's interesting, though, is that I rewatched the first part a couple days ago while I was like doing grading or things, and I blinked and I was just like, wait, is the Two-Face part in part 2? I feel like I didn't even see it. Like, clearly I just wasn't paying full attention. I was just like, God, it's so short and it's over before you know it. Yeah. And then the other thing, the image of Batman using a rifle, even though it wasn't a gun per se, but just like the idea of him using a rifle for that, I don't know, that always stood out to me as interesting. Something about that is, I think, people get all very bent out of shape when Batman uses a gun, but his grappling hook is a gun. Like, it's just it's a handgun. It just, like, and it's the same thing in Batman vs. Superman. It's like, it's not an actual gun.
No.
It just looks like a gun. Just like half of his tools look like guns.
Right. I know we're jumping ahead of ourselves here, but I actually like, later on, he does use an actual gun to detonate an explosive, and it's done a little bit differently in the film, and I think to its merit, he's holding the gun, aiming it at the bomb, and his hand is shaking, and you can take that two ways. You can either say he's old and rusty, which is a theme that comes up constantly, but you could also say it's just a general hesitation to even use a gun, because it is so anti what he does, even though, you know, he knows he's not shooting it at a person, and as you said, he's used what are basically guns before. I do actually really like that you can take that moment in two ways. Yeah,
I don't have a tremendous amount of investment in this story, in this movie. It feels, I wouldn't say unnecessary, but it's such a small component of the story in the grand scheme of things, especially considering how big it gets. I have to say, I didn't really like the idea, like he was going to blow up a tower. Given how big things get, like there's a nuclear fuck bomb in this story, I feel like they could have gone a little bit smaller here with this story. They didn't need to go so big with this big spectacle of an attack where like Batman casually tightropes across a couple skyscrapers, Harvey falls out of a helicopter, there's a giant explosion, yada yada yada. I don't know. It always just felt a little overly big given what would come. But that's nitpicking. Yeah, I don't know. What else? Did anything else to add about the Harvey Dent portion?
No, just again that image is one of the huge ones that sticks out to me. And it is quite small because they are telling this larger story about what the whole story is about is Bruce's grappling with being Batman and his inability to let go of it. And I think they bring in Two-Face, they bring in Joker, they bring in Robin, they bring in Superman, they bring in the mutants to analyze that, really.
Yep.
So I can see how it is not quite enough, but it isn't out of place in the comic where you do get cameos more than you do in films, where you expect to see characters built up and to be important rather than throwaway. So yeah, although animated films do this quite a lot as well. Like a lot of these films you see, it starts with them fighting a villain who is then gone after 10 minutes to set up the greater story. So
yeah, it feels like a common balancing issue that the animated movies have to face, where it's like, okay, we have the power to use all these villains.
Yeah.
Now what do we do with them? Like,
sort of infinite budget, well, not infinite budget, but you have the ability to do things on a grander scale for less money.
you were so focused on whether or not you could do this, you never decide whether or not you should. Thank you, Jeff Goldblum. You are so wise, in so many ways.
He is the mascot of the real world.
All right, so part 1 ends with a public denouncement of Batman, with the Joker and Harvey's doctor on TV saying Batman is the true villain. Yeah. And that leads to a smile on the Joker's face. Yeah.
And I think it's a really great choice to save that until the end of this film.
Yes.
Personally, because the way it plays out in the book, he smiles halfway through book 1 of 4, so basically about 20 minutes into the film, of the first film that would be. And you see him slowly plotting this, and it's clear what is going to happen. And it really takes the impact out of it for me. Whereas ending on the huge moment of, Joker's been catatonic for 10 years because he can't exist without Batman. Their rivalry is that intrinsic to who he is. And then he smiles at the end of part 1, and that's such a boom sort of moment. And then it sets up the beginning of part 2.
So the Joker kills a bunch of people, obviously.
Yeah.
His doctor, it's violent, it's gruesome, it's awful.
Yeah. I think it's some of the most... Because Joker's done a lot of horrific stuff throughout films, cartoons, books, etc. I think the carnival scene it's like the least sympathetic this character's ever been, where people almost celebrate his violence. Some people do. And they like the character of the Joker. And I think that carnival scene, in both iterations, the book has a little bit more, like he murders a bunch of Boy Scouts, which is completely absent from the film. But the whole general scene is so sort of deplorable in a way that a lot of Joker scenes aren't. I think it's really powerful. Just the way he's just shooting at random, just anyone and everyone. And it feels very different.
It definitely feels different. It feels like this was probably the biggest influence on Jared Leto's Joker, would you say?
Yeah, probably.
Like there's that element you talked about where he could just kill anyone at any moment.
Yeah, I'd say so.
There's nothing really...
If Heath Ledger is killing Joke, I would say Jared Leto is probably this version.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like a mass spectacle. It feels like he's just killing people. And it's dark.
I think it allows... I think what you make a good point, though, is that this movie is basically almost like a giant...
examination of Batman.
A Batman, yeah. And so here he's tested in, is he willing to kill to save lives?
He decides he's going to.
Yes.
But then he doesn't.
Yeah. I mean, Joker offs himself, but
does he?
I think Batman broke his neck, though, right?
Yeah, this is a thing.
Okay.
I honestly can't remember if I read this somewhere, if I came up with this myself. I can't be the only person that's thought this. There is an argument to be made that when he sort of partially breaks his neck, he actually fully broke his neck, and everything that the Joker says after that, he's sort of imagined in his head to sort of make it all right with himself, almost. I don't think that is what happened, but to me there's enough doubt there that isn't a reading you could do. Because the way it's portrayed, he snaps his neck and sort of paralyzes him, but he doesn't kill him. And then Joker, I think it's said, like, with demonic strength, he breaks his own neck fully. And witnesses saw him snap his neck, and they all run away. And then when people get in there, there's this mutilated body, broken neck. Batman has spat on him, and then he sets incendiary charges on him. So he, fucks up his corpse. And as far as the public are concerned, he killed Joker there, very violently. And I do like that you could read it as he did kill him, or he paralyzed him and couldn't quite go through with it.
Yeah, it's. I do think when you think of this as just an examination of Batman, they cover a lot of things, and they cover a lot of things well in that way. I think, once again, it feels a little rushed, it feels a little tacked on, it feels not fully earned, but I guess there's so much history with Batman and Joker.
Yeah.
If you kind of just think of this as like a 20-page detour in a larger story, it does work. It's a much calmer, eerie Joker than
Yeah.
I think most people, including myself, are used to.
It is a very different take. He's voiced by Michael Emerson, Ben Linus from Lost.
Oh, that's right. I forgot.
I don't know if I love the voice, but I do like that it's different.
Yeah, I mean, I'm always into trying new things with establishment characters. Like, there's nothing like we're not married to this interpretation of the Joker, so I don't mind trying it.
It doesn't have to be Mark Hamill. It doesn't have to be Heath Ledger.
Yeah, but at the same time, that doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to like it. But I think this is a worthy entry. I think, especially when there's not the threat of more films populated by Jared Leto.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more just like of a worthy detour. It's a little bit more like, okay, that was interesting. Now I can move on. I think part of what makes Suicide Squad and Jared Leto's interpretation of Batman so just like off-putting is I was like, God, like there's gonna be more of this. I feel like, yeah, I mean, sidebar, but anyway, that's a separate conversation.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think this is interesting. I think the question. I think based on how they established Batman and Gotham in general, the question of Batman, should he kill to save lives? Should he sacrifice his own nobility for that? Is he being selfish by not killing people? It's a worthy debate once you accept the premise of who Batman and the Joker are.
Yeah. And it's phrased as, I think it's said in the film as well, it's definitely said in the book, he calls it people he's murdered by not stopping Joker.
Yes.
And it is a thing that comes up where... You know Joker is going to keep killing people, so at some point you're responsible for those lives, potentially.
Yes. And I think I've sort of started thinking about your idea for like a 5-season Batman show on Netflix, and I think the end game has to be Batman killing Joker and then turning himself in. Just because I think that question needs to be addressed, and it can't, like, you've seen Dexter, right?
No, I haven't.
Okay. Well, it sucks and don't watch it past the first season. But the end of the second season, Dexter has to make a choice. Like, is he a killer? Is he like he justifies all of his killings based on the fact that like
he kills serial killers.
He's killing serial killers. So the end of season 2, he's faced with a choice. Someone found out who he was. Is he going to go to jail for doing all these things, or is he going to kill this person who knows? Yeah. And like it's all about building to this choice, and the show finds some loophole to get him out of that choice.
Obviously,
and because that's what shitty shows do.
Yeah, they write themselves into corners and they Deus Ex Machina them.
Yeah, and I think Batman needs to be confronted with this choice.
Yeah, it is a real sort of "are you full of shit or do you mean this" kind of thing.
Yeah, and in the same way is if Batman really believes in the law, like he needs to superheroes in general, especially are somewhat fascist in nature, and that they're especially ones that are working outside of the law in the sense that they don't have to answer for anything that they do.
And he says he addresses that. He says to Superman, "We were always criminals."
Yes, and I think they tackle it more head on here than most interpretations of Batman.
Yeah.
It's not like a direct hit, but it's relatively head on. They at least address it. And anyway, so I think that's what this story more than anything was make me think of a Batman Joker endgame. So in that sense, I'm grateful for this story because it's fun imagining what that would look like on screen. But it's a worthy idea to tackle in this all-encompassing examination of Batman.
Yeah, and it also feeds back into the assertion that he invites these people, because it is a coincidence that Two-Face returns as Batman does, but it's not a coincidence that Joker comes back. And that doctor blames him for having that effect on Harvey. True or false, doesn't matter. He definitively does bring Joker back into the game, and hundreds of people die immediately. And it is a great sort of assessment of the rights and wrongs, the merits and bad points of the very existence of Batman. I think Joker is used, again, to sort of analyze that character.
Now, would it have been more interesting that instead of the mutants, it's just Harvey coming back to life, and then there's someone running around with a taped up head, and everyone assumes it's Two-Face, and Batman decides, I'm going to be Batman to prove everyone wrong? Or is that not... But just like this notion Or is that not? Is that too selfless of him in some ways?
Kind of. And I also don't know if I'm convinced he needs to be Batman to do that.
Well, that's the whole point, though. In his mind, he does.
Well, that seems more of a reach than it does for the mutants, because with the mutants, it's a general fear thing, wherein they have control of the city and they're not scared of anyone.
Two-Face is running around being a fucking terrorist nutjob like he is in this movie. I think that's good enough reason.
Maybe. If you do more with his gang, maybe. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Instead, if you just take what was done with the mutants and do a lot of it with Harvey, at least in terms of actions, like. But anyway, that's... You could do that, but then you obviously lose the great moment of him sort of being the surgeon and taking apart the mutant leader.
But is that moment worth everything else involved? Slice and dice! Chicken leg! Slice and dice! I would say the answer is no, but it's not worth it.
But you've made your feelings clear about the mutants, so...
So that transitions to our last big battle.
No, hang on. I do think I think you need a big behemoth character. Maybe you do replace the mutants. Maybe you bring Bane into it. I don't know. Because
I really just hate the mutants. Like, get rid of the mutants. But they're so dumb.
I think in this narrative we've established where we're deconstructing Batman, I think you do need a huge character, and I think you need a physical challenge. Because a huge part of this is he's old as shit now, and his body literally can't take it anymore. And in his youth, maybe he would have been able to fight a guy like this. And I also love the idea that he has to know if he can take that guy. And that feeds back into this, the Batman isn't healthy, you are not well, etc. Because he could quite easily have taken out the mutant leader with the tank, because he takes out the whole gang with these rubber bullets. And then he chooses to go fight the mutant leader just to test himself. And I think that's another part of the character. You could have done Bane, absolutely.
Bane.
But at that point...
It should have been Bane.
Alright, yeah, fine. Bane. In our version, it's Bane.
Okay, so...
I will finally let you move on to part 2 now.
Well, we were in part 2 with Joker.
That's true, sorry. Further in part 2.
Superman. Just walking around with his unbuttoned dress shirts, catching eagles on his arm.
That's a great moment. Him standing there, an eagle landing on his arm.
Yeah, America. I think probably one of the best things here when I talk about like things being great on the margins is just like Reagan being like this squirrely fucking asshole. Which is also partly funny just because like Frank Miller's like a crazy conservative now. Like I'm sure like everything he says is like promoted by like the Reaganite like worshippers still, so that's kind of funny. It all builds to a Batman versus Superman showdown. And it's done in kind of actually not necessarily similar, but in that same kind of like obligatory build where it's like we have to fight each other. We're going to fight each other. Okay, now we're fighting. I don't know. It kind of reminds me of Batman vs Superman that way. It's just like,
but I think that would be valid if not for the fact. If you take out the whole aspect where Superman works for the President of the United States, actively enforcing American will on other countries, and you have all that stuff about the Justice League forcibly being made to disband, Wonder Woman goes back to Themyscira, I forget how to say it, Green Lantern leaves the planet, and they say, what happened to Oliver, the Green Arrow, sorry. And I like that whole thing of sort of alluding to some shady business going down, with Superman being left with a license, essentially, in return for the rest of them stopping. And I wouldn't want to lose that. And it is very Watchmen-y, like you said at the beginning. And I think it's interesting, and if you accept that, I think it is inevitable that they fight, because Batman is the ultimate anti-authority figure, and you've now got the ultimate Boy Scout literally being the Gipper's fucking whipping boy. So I think in that context, it is inevitable.
Yeah, that's fair. I wasn't yawning because of the story. I actually think the thing I enjoyed most about this, I really liked the Arrow, Green Arrow. Is that
Green Arrow?
Showing up at the end.
Yeah.
I liked all that stuff. There was a lot of just immediate pathos there.
Yeah,
like,
grizzly, one-armed badass.
Yeah, doesn't have an arm, like, hanging off the side of buildings.
Firing blows with his teeth.
Yeah, I thought that was really interesting.
And they heavily imply that Superman took his arm as well.
I almost, like... Again, this is just... because I think what you're right is if you approach this as an examination of Batman, a deconstruction, if you will, perhaps.
Yes. The Batman Superman debate is a huge part of his character. So
yeah, this whole thing succeeds. I'm such a narrative creature though, and I crave good narrative, and I see so many good narratives here that are kind of sacrificed for that examination, or narratives that are shortchanged in favor of the examination, and it's frustrating because it's like seeing the actual breakup. I mean, like honestly, a true Watchmen style examination of the Justice League would almost be more like, Superman. Like, I mean, this is which one came out first? Because this felt so Watchmen-y to me. Which book came out first?
I think Watchmen slightly predates it.
But this felt.
I'll look it up.
Deeply influenced by Watchmen. Right down. I mean, like Dr. Manhattan is fucking working for the president.
Oh man, I think it came out.
I thought it was 83, but that's
no, 86 to 87 it was published. Dark Knight Returns is the same year. I'm going to try and figure out which came out earlier in the year.
So I guess it's nearly impossible to say one was influenced by the other, but
yeah, they were probably both planned for quite a while.
Yeah,
before.
I guess they just captured the mood of the time equally.
He beat into it. Just Dark Knight Returns came out first.
That's actually really interesting.
It wrapped up in June, and Watchmen started in October.
That's really genuinely fascinating to me.
So.
But yeah, I mean, there's so much of that there. There's like this, and I think that history of what happened to the Justice League, where are they now? Again, it's like that great narrative's right there, and we only get bits and pieces of it. But
I mean, this is a deconstruction of Batman. Watchmen is a deconstruction of superheroes generally, and it's Alan Moore being like, fuck superheroes, essentially. Yes, but then he writes the most celebrated superhero story of all time, so he's shot himself
100%. Like, I'm not saying this story is not successful in what it's aiming for. I'm just saying it's teasing so many other things I would have found more interesting.
The first one of those I ever saw is The Incredibles, and I remember thinking, this is a really interesting story. Superheroes sort of forced down by the government, and then as I get older, I realise this is being taken from so many other stories.
Yes. But I love the Arrow stuff. Like, I crave to know more about him. I love that he was still there at the end in the Bat Cavern. I don't know if cave
helping set up the Sons of Batman. Yeah.
Everything about that was great stuff. And once again, like, we got another cool, like, Batman plan to take down Superman. Yeah. I like with this one, even here though, there was so much more rich because you could feel like this is what he's been planning for like 20 years. And
when he says that line about it took years and millions or something like that to make that kryptonite arrow, but I had both. Like, as in, and that implies possibly before he retired, but certainly since whenever this stuff went down with Superman, or even before, he's been making this. And the idea that even when he was retired, he was actually still doing shit like this.
All that stuff is great. It's like it's a compelling conclusion. It's an eye-popping conclusion. It's Batman versus fucking Superman, of course.
Yeah. And I like that he spares him as well. Like,
yes,
he knows that he's essentially been like a hit has been put on him, and if Superman doesn't kill him, one of these soldiers is probably going to. And in the book, you get this moment where Superman realizes that Batman's heart is beating dangerously fast, and he says a line about, now you're starting to realize this is it for both of us, where he fully doesn't expect to survive. I mean, he has the plan, but I think he's almost actively attempting to give himself a heart attack to get out of this death. And I do like that he spares Superman.
It's good. It's interesting. It's just a tease of a story that's you have to like really guess at. But it's interesting. I'm talking back on it now. It's probably actually my favorite portion of the book.
Okay. Yeah, I prefer the first film actually as a complete film, but 2 certainly has the bigger moments that I look back on.
Oh, for sure. I mean, part 1 feels like a complete story with a tease.
Yeah, almost, yeah.
And I mean, part 2 is definitely like a sequel to part 1, but it's also just like so many fucking things going on at the same time, especially compared to part 1.
Sure.
But part 1 definitely feels like its own story.
Yeah. What do you think of the It's a thing that reoccurs throughout the heavy use of these sort of TV reports.
I really like it.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. I think it's a lot of fun. I think it's weird that all the men are still in tit-tot fighting shape, but like Lana Lang and Selena Kyle are just like
fat old women, yeah.
like portrayed to be like gross looking. Like, I mean, like, okay, standards of beauty for men and women are different. Haha, yeah, like maybe I'm part of the problem, but it's just like within that shitty construct, you play into that more than anything. I don't know.
Bruce Wayne is still huge.
Yeah, like he's so huge. He's huge in a good way. Like he's muscly somehow. Like he's like this brick wall of a human being.
When you see him standing there next to Alfred and Carrie after being had surgery done on him, he's fucking huge.
Yeah, I mean, like we haven't even mentioned Gordon. Gordon's all throughout this movement, fucking doing shit, getting shit done.
Fuck yeah, Jim Gordon.
And you know, Selena Kyle is like a madam. I can't imagine any. It's not that her being a madam was wrong. It's just like I can't imagine any interpretation of Catwoman that I've seen that Selena Kyle would physically let herself go in such a way. And I think it's just kind of weird. It's just weird. Like, I mean, you got fucking Green Arrow fucking hanging off the side of buildings. He's got one arm. Like, his hair, he barely has any hair left. And meanwhile, like, this is what Selena Kyle... It's just
sick
weird.
Beard, though. Sick, old, nothing left to lose beard going on.
And it's great, but it's like,
you
know...
No, that's fair.
Why not do the same thing with Catwoman? Why be gross about it?
Speaking of Jim Gordon, I really like... So when the huge riot is going on, he's out getting groceries for Sarah, implied to be Sarah Essen, the woman he has the affair with in year one.
Yes.
I love that he's racing home to get to her, but along the way he notices people are in trouble, and he can't help but help them. And it seemingly is at the expense of Sarah's life. I think it almost would have been more powerful if she died, but she is revealed to be alive. But I think that's such a Jim Gordon moment where he is that person that will walk through fire for a stranger.
Yeah, I think they do a good job of Gordon throughout the story, I'd say. Like, he's not a crucial part, but he's he's part of the glue. Alfred gets very, very little to do. To me, before the Nolan trilogy, like, this is just like what Alfred is to me. Like, he's like totally on the sidelines, barely doing anything. I still have yet to see many other interpretations of Alfred where he's such a critical part of the story.
He is very frequently off to the side. There are stories here and there where he's more prominent, but yeah, it is Nolan's influence that's made him feel like he should be more important.
Yeah, like he just seems so taken for granted in so many of these stories, and I don't know. It always just feels like a missed opportunity, but that's modernized looking back at something for sure.
The nuclear attack, right? I think this is vague in both versions because Bruce explicitly says something to the effect of "Clark, you idiot, you let them do it," and I think there's even an implication that the technology they use comes from Superman. Because it's like some crazy nuclear bomb that seems more powerful than any that actually existed at the time. What was your read on that whole situation?
I have no idea.
I
found it pretty uninteresting. It was just like I honestly I didn't examine it too closely.
It's just that line that "you idiot, Clark, you let them do it" that really stuck out to me.
I thought that was interesting. I guess that was the one part of the bomb thing that was interesting.
And I do like Reagan giving his cheery message while wearing like a nuclear suit in like a bunker somewhere.
I thought a lot of the Reagan stuff was very, very appropriately cynical for such a shitty dude. Shitty president, I should say. Yeah, I don't know. What are our big takeaways from this?
As I've said, and I think every time I say it, I make it a less poignant point. I think it's a great examination of Batman by moving him into the future and sort of taking away his ability to be Batman, and then seeing, just really getting to who Bruce Wayne is. And I think it also, it was written in the 80s, and there is a lot of stuff with sort of cynicism and critique of government. You get a lot of stuff like Reagan passes the buck to the governor, who passes it to the mayor of Gotham, who then passes it on to the new commissioner, and you get a lot of people just talking in background scenes about, oh yeah, they love it, that's great for TV, and just all these sorts of things. I didn't I didn't grow up in America in the 80s, but that seems quite astute to incorporate that, a sort of distrust of government and
the casual things with the media. Just in, Jim Gordon has been murdered. Wait, what's that? Oh, Jim Gordon has murdered someone.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was just I like all that stuff was fun. I feel like this is like a 500-page story. I can't help it. Or I really feel I almost would have. There's two big things. One, I would love someone to take the core Justice League issue here and use that to tell this story. It would seem like a complete Watchmen ripoff, but now that I know Watchmen started being released a few months later, I feel there's no need to feel bad about that.
Yeah.
Two, I love the idea that this story is told in general. Like, I love one-shots. As I've talked about, Batman is great for one-shots. This is how we should be telling Batman stories in film. Like, we do not need these big crossover events with a bunch of other ridiculous superheroes. Like, there's so much room there for great storytelling, or at least unique storytelling.
Unless they are one-armed and old. Then they can do cameos.
Yes. Or they should just be the center of the movie. I don't know. But it's so weird to take this story and adapt it to introduce a cinematic universe. It really struck me this time. I was like, this is like the weirdest story ever to borrow elements from to kick off the DC extended universe.
Oh, because by its very nature, it can't actually happen. And also, Batman's old as fuck. Where'd you go from there?
Yeah, starting off with this grizzled, cynical Batman, and it's just like, I don't know, it's very weird. I can't. It feels like one of those decisions that's made without a lot of thought put into it.
It's just, they literally just went, hey, this story is super popular, let's invoke it. And it doesn't matter that there's problems with it, fuck that, we'll write our way around that, and they don't.
There's a reason why this story exists in the medium that this exists without being attached to anything official before or after.
Yeah.
Obviously Frank Miller wrote sequels, but at the time this was designed as a one-shot, and I haven't read the KKK one yet, or Dark Knight Returns. I'm sure they're lovely books.
Yeah, no.
I've heard they're awful. I guess I'll read them one day, but I heard they're fucking awful. But
I think as a project by Frank Miller, here's a cool idea I came up with for a comic book. I think it succeeds tremendously.
Yes.
It had such an impact. I think as films, they adapt that pretty well. As I said, I watched this while reading it, and it's almost like for like. It's a little bit less effective. There's nothing... I don't think there's anything all that wrong with it. Some of the voice work's a little bit shaky.
I'm not a big Peter Weller fan. I feel like he's a little too monotone.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of humanity in his in his voice work here. I thought David Selby was pretty good as Gordon.
Yeah.
For all the Mighty Duck 3 fans, that's the Dean from that movie.
Nice. But yeah, some of the voice work is quite shaky. But I think it's generally, as adaptations of sort of beloved stories go, that, maybe it is a mistake to be too faithful to an adaptation. That is a huge criticism against the Watchmen film. But as adaptations go, I think this is a pretty good one. I like both the films quite a lot, personally. I know you're a little bit less high on them. I'm
definitely overall thumbs down in terms of its overall quality. I don't think, though, that takes away from how interesting and conversation-worthy they are.
I think that's the biggest thing about it, is this is the most interesting Batman story potentially ever told.
Possibly.
I'm literally just pulling that out of my ass. It sort of holds up.
But there's just so much going on here that you can't help but... we could probably talk about this for 3 hours if we really wanted to.
Yeah, we're going that way.
But it's interesting. It's worthy of discussion.
Yeah.
It's worthy of exploring. It's worthy of everyone coming up with their own opinions on it.
I'm glad they made it because,
yes,
personally, I don't like the art of the book. I know there's probably a legion.
It's awful.
I won't use those words, but I don't care for it.
I find it so off-putting. I can see an argument that maybe it worked for the tone of the book, but I find it kind of... it makes me not want to reread. It's part of the reason why I don't want to reread the book. Like, I just don't find the visual style appealing anyway. But I guess once again,
I also think it's quite hard to follow because it's the pages are quite cluttered. It doesn't use traditional paneling. So
I mean, like, props to them for trying something different.
Yeah.
But
and for those reasons, I'm glad they did adapt it, and because this is such an important story in the history of Batman, so I'm glad that this sort of more accessible version of it exists. Yeah, I mean, it does draw attention to the fact that there's some pacing issues and that you should maybe flesh out some of this stuff a bit more. But I think in terms of getting into who Batman is, I think this is as important a story as there is. So I'm glad it exists. And I overall like it. So
yeah, and I think for me, my last slide is I love examining these animated adaptations of the famous comic stories. I think it's really interesting. And I hope they keep doing it. Hopefully they don't run out of good or interesting comics, but I think they're about to soon. Go watch this. Go.
If you can't stomach the art of the book, which some of us can't, do watch the film. Watch the film anyway. I think it's a pretty solid... It's like an inoffensive adaptation. It's not the kind of one where they made these changes and I hate it for doing that. Like, it moves some stuff around for pacing, and I think generally all for the better. And yeah, it's a huge story, so there's no reason to not watch it.
No, we need animated adaptations of Brubaker's Captain America books. Yeah, that's what we need.
Yeah, those are pretty good.
That's my closing thought.
That's your closing thought. Yeah.
That's my closing thought on the Dark Knight Returns podcast.
And with that, I have one final thought. You said you wanted to examine more stuff with the Justice League getting sort of shut down. A general recommendation for every human being on the planet is to read and watch Justice League: The New Frontier. That's a similar story. That's set in the 50s. And it's the Justice League have been sort of quietly, or superheroes have been quietly suppressed, and then it's about them returning. And
should we watch that?
Maybe, I don't know. It's not huge. Batman's like one of very many characters in it, so
okay.
There's some good Batman moments, but just generally. In the meantime, this has been another episode of the Real World Podcast, Tape Crusaders. We are drawing to a close on... I mean, there's so much Batman, I think we've basically said we're going to bring it to a close with Lego Batman, and then maybe revisit it down the line after we've done some other stuff. So we've got a few more to do. Not quite sure what we're going to do next time, but over the next few weeks we're going to do Batman Beyond, the movie with the Joker, the Return of the Joker, sorry. We're going to do the Batman the Animated Series somehow. I've got to find some I've got to find some key episodes for us to watch, essentially.
Maybe next week we say Return of Joker Under the Red Hood?
Well, both in one film. Ooh, in one episode. That could be interesting. Either way, we will be back next time with another episode of the Tape Crusaders. I've been Matt Waters. He's been Mike Thomas. The Real World Podcast, Mike and Matt on SoundCloud, etc. Do comment. I will try and give polite replies to you wherever you do them, even if you're critical of us. And Mike probably will be less polite in doing so.
Yeah.
American, British. It's just how it goes.